Hi, everybody. Welcome. I just said I thought I'd say a few words just to say welcome to a man who really does not need any introduction, as evidenced by the number of people here today. So we want to say welcome to Jack Craig. Have fun.
Good morning. Good morning. I don't know who to thank, but whichever one of you turned off the rain spigot, thank you. Thank you. I will admit, I told someone a little earlier on Tuesday I was very proud to be part of a record-setting event, and that was driving through Worcester when they set a one-day record for rainfall. And you got to look for the positives. So if your windshield wipers are going on hyperspeed and they're still not clearing off the water, you know something's going on. And then to learn that you're part of a record-setting event, let alone getting probably the best free car wash I've got in life. I always try to find the positives in things. So today and next Wednesday, I'll say that a couple of times just so we stay on track, because usually I'm here on the same day each week, but because of scheduling issues, I'm here today and then next Wednesday for a two-part program. I took advantage of the opportunity of 2 consecutive weeks to bring a pair of programs, and I could do 10 programs on signature songs by band leaders, because at the height of the swing era, there were thousands of band leaders scattered nationwide. And actually, out of about 8,000 or 9,000 band leaders, only about 100 became big-name band leaders. And I'm kind of in that category with these programs. I've looked at about 7,000 different swing bands and reduced that down to a couple of hundred for some other work that I do that concentrates on the development of swing era music. But then I decided I really wanted to accentuate the band leaders themselves. So unlike some of my other programming I do with you, I'm not talking much today about the songwriters or the song itself musically. I'm talking about the band leader that the song gets associated with. And some of the facets of the stories of band leaders were absolutely amazing. And I do half of the alphabet today. So don't come up to me at the end of the program and say you left out Glenn Miller. Just come back next Wednesday morning at 11 and you will be satisfied in that way. Now, one other little caveat. All my work is geared to getting you singing with me. I think you know that. I don't need to tell that here with this audience. But some band leaders actually had theme songs that were instrumental and didn't really have words. So a great example of that for someone we're doing today would be, for instance, Count Basie. He had a piece called the 1 O'Clock Jump, and you hardly ever heard any words to it ever. So people just don't know it as a song with words. So a couple of times I've substituted another great hit for that band leader that fits that kind of description, you might say. I want to use the first page of your booklet to explain the template for the handout, and that will hold for this week and next week. The number is next to the song, and the band leader the song represents is underneath the lyrics for the song. And so our first song celebrates Louis Armstrong, since I'm going alphabetically through the band leaders. Nice for him to be first. I think you would know, here's another good example. I could spend the whole program on just Louis Armstrong. It's an amazing life story with all kinds of songs associated with it. But today's purpose is to give you a thumbnail sketch of the band leader and then play a song that either the band leader himself considered to be his personal favorite, or it was the theme song for the band, etc., etc. When you look next to the information for Louis down at the bottom, I'll only explain it for him, and then you'll know what you're looking at for the remainder of the band leaders. Beside his name are the years of his life. Underneath his name is his birthplace and the place of his passing. And then there's an interesting line that says active, and it gives you the years that that band leader was really active with the band in the story of music in the American culture. So a wonderful career for Louis Armstrong. Of course, the marvelous thing about him is he was an abandoned kid in New Orleans when somebody gave him what we call a toy trumpet. Now, a toy trumpet isn't a toy, as in a child's toy. It's a real trumpet, but made small so a smaller child or person could play it. And play it he did, and then as a teenager he got the real-sized one, and then he made his way up the Mississippi River playing on riverboats, and up into Chicago playing with King Oliver's Creole Jazz Band, and then from there to New York and the Cotton Club and Connie's Inn, and so on and so forth, and the rest of the story is history. Eventually having Louis Armstrong's All-Stars touring the world, appearing in movies. So we're not talking about just a little local fame here, we're talking about worldwide fame. But quite frankly, although I could pick East St. Louis Toodaloo or any one of his great early songs, Louis Armstrong himself considered his early preeminent theme song to be When It's Sleepy Time Down South. He liked it because it honored his roots where he had come from in New Orleans. You can just probably close your eyes. I might even try to do a half-hearted version of Louis here as we get going with number one. And remember, I accept singing by any definition you want to give it. So whatever happens when you open your mouth is fine.
Pale moon shining on the fields below. Folks are crooning songs soft and low. Didn't tell me so because I know it's sleepy time down south. Soft winds blowing through the pinewood trees. Folks down there live the life of ease. When old Mammy falls upon her knees, it's sleepy time down south. Steamboats on the river are coming, are going, splashing the night away. Hear those banjos ringing, the folks are a-singing, they dance till break of day. Dear old Southland and its dreamy songs takes me back where I belong. I'd love to be in Mammy's arms when it's sleepy time down south. Oh yeah.
Our next band leader, you may not know by name. No clapping till the end of the program. It just wastes time. So Gus Arnheim was very much a West Coast band leader, but a very significant name. An easy way to summarize him is to point out a couple of things. When he was young, he was an early accompanist for Sophie Tucker on the piano. So you're talking about a great piano player. And then as he got his band started out at the Coconut Grove in Los Angeles in California, he had several momentous events, but the one I chose to put in your handout was the hiring, making the final recording with the Rhythm Boys, who were a group of 3 singers, Harry Barris and Al Rinker, and this fellow by the name of Harry Lillis Crosby, better known to you as Bing Crosby. So if Gus Arnheim doesn't give the Rhythm Boys a chance to sing, as Paul Whiteman did, and make records with them, maybe we don't get Bing Crosby. So right there is a good enough reason to include him. His band's theme song was Sweet and Lovely. He co-wrote his theme song. It's really pretty. Sweet and lovely, sweeter than the roses in May. Sweet and lovely, heaven must have sent her my way. Skies above me never were as blue as her eyes. And she loves me, who would want a sweeter surprise? remember, you're welcome to keep your booklet at the end of the program, because the only way I've been able to get this program done in about an hour and 15 minutes is if I don't read everything that's there in front of you. Mitch Ayers, wonderful. I'm using him as an example because there were many band leaders who went to college and studied in college and never used their college degrees. While they were in college, they began playing with the band, and then some of them even dropped out of college to take their bands on the road. Some graduated college and then took their bands on the road. So a great many band leaders were collegians, and probably much to the depression of their parents who had paid their college tuitions, they never ended up using their degrees. But getting back to Mitch Ayers, he's wonderful. He formed his own band in 1937 and had his own radio program. I'll mention this a little later. There were many ways that bands came to our ears. They might have been at a hotel site, playing at a hotel site, but that hotel site might have been a radio broadcast site, or they might have been a touring band, or they might have been a recording band making records of popular songs, or they might have been a radio band. There were all kinds of niches for band leaders to hang their hats in. Later in his career, Mitch Ayers conducted the band that accompanied the Andrews Sisters. So as the Andrews Sisters were giantly popular, they would need a band to travel with them and do their programming. And then he conducted the band that backed some young fellow by the name of Pierino Ronald Cuomo, better known to you as Perry Como. Celebrating Mitch Ayers, number 3 in your book. You crawl to my head, and you linger like a haunting refrain, and I find you spinning round in my brain, like the bubbles in a glass of champagne. You crawl to my head, like a sip of sparkling burgundy brew, and I find the very mention of you like a kicker in a julep or two. A thrill of the thought that you might give a thought to my plea casts a spell over me. Still I say to myself, get a hold of yourself, can't you see that it never can be? You crawl to my head with a smile that makes my temperature rise, like a summer with 1,000 Julys. You intoxicate my soul with your eyes. Oh, I'm certain that this heart of mine hasn't the ghost of a chance in this crazy romance. You crawl through my head. You crawl through my head. So now we do arrive at Count Basie, one of what I call the royalty of swing bands. I'm really being humorous about that. There were 3 band leaders. One that came in the 1920s, we'll get to him in a little while. He picked up the moniker Duke Ellington. And there was another band leader in the 20s who played and performed under the name Earl Father Hines. And then came William Basie, who was really Bill Basie, a member of Kenny Moten's band out in Kansas City, Missouri. And when Kenny Moten passed away, Bill Basie took over the band. And the band members said, well, you need to get a nickname. We already got a Earl, we already got a Earl, and we already got a Duke. We'll call you Count. And that's how the nickname came in place. He actually was born in Red Bank, New Jersey, and if you're ever down that way, boy, do they have him enshrined there properly in a theater that's turned into a museum for Count Basie there. I mentioned his real theme song was instrumental, the 1 O'Clock Drum. I hope you won't mind singing another huge Basie hit, April in Paris. April in Paris, chestnuts in blossom, holiday tables under the trees. April in Paris, sometimes band leaders had their own instrumental specialty. That would be the case with Bunny Berrigan. Although he first took violin lessons as a kid, and I'll get back to that at another point either today or next Wednesday, he then took up trumpet, and like many other big-name band leaders, they just didn't start being famous. They played their way up through the ranks. And I could do that for any band leader in this program. In Bunny Berrigan's place, he played for Hal Kemp and his orchestra. I'll be doing Hal Kemp as a band leader later in the series. And then the word freelanced is there in your book. That's a musician's term that simply means you're going to play for the person that's going to pay you the most cash. It gets a fancy word, freelancing. But look at the names. He, Bunny Berrigan, freelanced as a trumpet player for Rudy Vallee and his orchestra, Tommy Dorsey, Paul Whiteman, Benny Goodman. If you're good enough to play for those band leaders, you're good enough to lead your own band. And lead it he did, and his theme song was I Can't Get Started With You. I've flown around the world in a plane. I've settled revolutions in Spain. The North Pole I have charted, but can't get started with you. Around the Gulf Coast I've wandered far, and all the movies want me to star. I've got a house in the showplace, but I get no place with you. You're so supreme, lyrics I write on the screen, just for a sight of your dream. All day and night up your brand, what good does it do? In 1929 I still snore. In England I'm presented at court. You got me downhearted, 'cause I can't get started with you. Turning to band leader number 6 is a name you might not have a lot of familiarity with. Myron Bradshaw was a diminutively small man, and he picked up the nickname Tiny Bradshaw. He had freelanced. He was a very good drummer. And he had freelanced, as I explained that word for you previously, for other people along the way. And in 1934, he actually developed his own band. When he did, and I really put him in partly because of the uniqueness of the song he chose to be his theme song. There was no rhyme or reason as to why a band leader would latch on to a particular song. Sometimes they wrote it, other times they chose it. And Tiny Bradshaw chose an old, beautiful waltz from 1904 and made it his theme song. It was beautiful. It goes like this. It was fascination, I know, and it might have ended right there at the start. Just a passing glance, just a brief romance, and I might have gone on my way empty-hearted. It was fascination, I know, seeing you alone with that moonlight above. And I touched your hand and next moment I kissed you. Fascination turned to love. So unless you can show me your driver's license from 1904, I'm going to guess the reason you might know that song is because of the popularity that Tiny Bradshaw gave to it in the 1930s. It would take probably everyone in the room being capable of finishing this phrase for me. Les Brown and his... Every voice, right? Does that mean a band leader's famous? I guess so. Famous for what? Well, for too much more than I can talk about here. Famous for his USO work with Bob Hope during World War II. Famous for bringing Doris Day into prominence, in particular with this song we're about to sing. Famous for being the house band for the Steve Allen television show. So after the swing era pretty much had drawn to a close, let's say, in the late 40s, swing bands found new opportunities on that square box with a picture tube in it called a television, and there were opportunities there. Later, he would be the same for the Dean Martin TV variety show as Dean Martin came on TV. So his band backed Frank Sinatra, it backed Ella Fitzgerald. I could go on and on. You could spend the whole program on Les Brown and his band of renown. I think we better just, I better just shut up and let you sing Sentimental Journey. Oh, take a sentimental journey. Up and about half of you are looking right at me singing the song, not even using the booklet. I think that's how well some of these songs were known. In that case, Les Brown co-wrote that song with two other band members. Billy Butterfield was a great trumpeter. Now let's talk about the instruments that the band leaders themselves played. If you study 8,000 or 9,000 swing bands as I have, you will discover, hands down, the most commonly played instrument by the band leader himself or herself was the violin. Hands down. The reason is pretty obvious. If you study swing music, band leaders who played violin were pretty knowledgeable with classical music and therefore knowledgeable to work on arrangements and understand the other instruments in their band. So hands down, violin common. Then you can find all other kinds of instruments, clarinet and saxophone and drums and trumpet. Trumpet would be the instrument of Billy Butterfield, our next band leader. So maybe you remember that Bing Crosby had a brother whose name was Bob. He adopted, you might say, a band in the 1930s and called them Bob Crosby and his Bobcats. And Billy Butterfield would play for him. But really, a momentous time for Billy Butterfield was playing the trumpet solo on Artie Shaw's recording of Stardust. Now, Artie Shaw's recording of Stardust gained a great deal of fame, and the trumpet solo was beautiful. So that certainly enabled him, after his service in the war during World War II, to form his own band. And he had a wonderful singer whose name was Margaret Whiting. I hope you might remember her name. And the theme song that she helped make famous for Billy Butterfield, and boy, could he take a luscious trumpet solo on this song, is Moonlight in Vermont. Pennies in a street, falling leaves and sycamore, moonlight in Vermont, icy finger waves, ski trails on a mountainside, snow light in Vermont, telegraph cables, they sing down the highway, travel each bend in the road, people who meet in this romantic setting are so hypnotized by the lovely evening summer breeze, blowing of a meadow lark, moonlight in Vermont, moonlight in Vermont. Some theme songs or signature songs were so attached to a particular band leader that hardly anybody else would do the song. Here's a good example of that. Cab Calloway with his friend Irving Mills co-wrote Minnie the Moocher. I have yet to find any other band leader that really ever performed this song. Cab Calloway became known as the Heidi-Ho Man because in the middle of the song, you're going to be echoing back to me, I'll be Cab Calloway, and the dancers would sing back to him, and he'd go on for 10 minutes with nonsense phrases in the middle of this song. I've only given you a couple of chances. The first time through, and then maybe the second time through, when you repeat them, I'll give you your hearing test for the morning. So you can read about Cab Calloway's start there. I think really the significant part gets in the early 1930s when he followed Duke Ellington's band into the Cotton Club in New York City. And that's about the time that he wrote and recorded Minnie the Moocher and became known as the Heidi-Ho Man, and here we go. Now here's a story about Minnie the Moocher. She was a low-down hoochie coocher. She was the roughest, toughest friend. Minnie had a heart as big as a whale. Ho-dee, ho-dee, ho. Ho-dee, ho-dee, ho. Ra-dee-da-dee-da. Ra-dee-da-dee-da. Teedle-dee-dee-dee. Teedle-dee-dee-dee. Ho-dee, ho-dee, ho-ho. Ho-dee, ho-dee, ho-ho. She messed around with the bloke named Smokey. She loved him though he was a hunky. He took her down to Chinatown, showed her how to kick the drum around. Heidi, Heidi, ho. Heidi, Heidi, ho. Reedy-da-dee-doo. Reedy-da-dee-doo. Bo-dee-da-do-da. Bo-dee-da-do-da. Ho-dee, ho-dee, ho-ho. Ho-dee, ho-dee, ho-ho. Poor men. Poor men. Poor men. Poor men. Poor men. Most of you did quite well with your hearing. When she messed around with a bloke named Smokey and loved him though he was a cokey, that didn't mean he liked Coca-Cola. I just thought I'd remind you that there were some temptations for you young ones back in the 30s. So stop complaining about your grandkids in the modern era. There, I got that out of the way. Xavier Cugat co-wrote his theme song. You may not know it. Cugat would play any great Latin song and any other great Latin song. A classically trained violinist, did I just say violin? A classically trained violinist born in Spain, then to Cuba, then to New York, and playing in the orchestra that accompanied Enrique Caruso when he'd come to the United States to tour. He appeared in early films and made early records and formed his own band. And for 16 years, he was the house band at the Waldorf Astoria. In New York. So I told you about bands that would play at hotels. And if you were there for 16 years, I guess you were drawing a crowd every night for 16 years. Famous for his Latin music, that we know for sure. Dinah Shore made her first recordings with Xavier Cugat and his orchestra. So you may not know my shawl all that well, but for Cugat, it was the specialty. In some Cuban town, you stop watching the lone maker of shawls. A quaint little man whose gay-colored bazaar stands near the walls. He smiles through his beard and spins heavenly dreams for every maid. A shawl in his hand, his call reaches their hearts as they parade. My shawl, pretty lady, try it on you. By my shawl, spun in magic, wishes come true. Its glory weaves a story of love rings on the moon. My shawl brings a romance, maybe for you. Our next song's also Latin, but was the personal favorite of Jimmy Dorsey. Of course, I'm taking kind of a bit of a cop-out here. For 1 year, the Dorsey brothers led a band together, Tommy and Jimmy. That was 1934, their first band. But the brothers would argue so vehemently, and in particular, a well-documented argument took place late in that year, right on the bandstand. Tommy, playing trombone, disagreed with the tempo that Jimmy, who was leading the band out in front, set for a particular song. And at the end of the song, he went up to his brother, took his trombone, and gave him what we call on a trombone a raspberry. He went, and he walked off the bandstand. They would not speak for 14 years. They would not speak until the late 1940s, and then they would play together again almost 20 years later in the early 1950s. But how lucky were we? Because Jimmy kept the band that was on the bandstand that night. Tommy bought out another band and instantly started playing, and you got two for the price of one. Which gives me two songs to put in for the Dorsey brothers today. Jimmy's personal favorite happened to be another Latin song. I don't think you or I would have known Amapola if it weren't for Jimmy Dorsey's prominent usage of it. Amapola, my pretty little body, you're like a lovely mother, so sweet and heavenly. Since I found you, my heart's wrapped around you, and loving you it seems to be a rhapsody. Amapola, my pretty little body, lost puppies in hearing from you. So you might remember names like Bob Everly and Helen O'Connell. You might remember songs like Green Eyes and Tangerine. All of that goes to Jimmy Dorsey. Tommy Dorsey, Jimmy playing clarinet and saxophone, Tommy Dorsey playing trombone, and his theme song actually most people know musically, but not lyrically. That's because Tommy would always play it first, down here on his trombone. See if you recognize this. Recognize it? Many people have never sung it because depending upon when he was playing it, Tommy might play it and maybe the vocalist would take a turn with it in the middle or maybe not. It just depended on what the plan was for that night. So many people getting to hear it for the first time with its words when we sing it here today. You can read about swiping Frank Sinatra from Harry James. I'll get to that when I get to Harry James in a few minutes. I mean, so many places along the way, Joe Stafford and the Pied Pipers, but I'm not here to talk about the singers. I'm not here to talk about the instrumentalists. I'm really here to get you focused on the band leaders themselves. So finally, in the early 1950s, when the swing era, as I said earlier, really had declined after World War II, that's a story for another day if we were doing detailed work on the swing era. But that allowed, I guess for lack of a better word, the brothers to reunite in 1953. But I want you to listen very carefully to the billing for the band. In 1953, it was the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra featuring Jimmy Dorsey. It kind of shows you who won in our eyes. Tommy was the more celebrated of the two over the close to 2 decades that they were performing separately. Here we go. Never thought I'd fall, but now I hear love's call. I'm getting sentimental over you. Things you say and do just thrill me through and through. I'm getting sentimental over you. I thought I was happy, I could live without love. Now I must admit love is all that I'm thinking of. turning to our next song and our next band leader, there are two brothers. There is Ray Eberly, the one that we're celebrating right now, and he's the younger brother of Bob Eberly. So I just mentioned Bob Eberly's name as a great singer with the Jimmy Dorsey Orchestra. And when Bob Eberly's brother, Ray, would sing, they wanted to be known apart from each other. So they spelled their last names differently so people could tell which brother was which. If you glance back at the notes, I hope I did it correctly, if you glance back at the notes for Jimmy Dorsey, you will see Bob Eberly, E-B-E-R-L-Y. And if you look at Ray, you'll see E-B-E-R-L-E. And that's how you can tell the younger brother of Bob, the elder, so to speak. So wonderful. He was hired by Glenn Miller. That was his first big chance as a singer. And if you're good enough to sing for Glenn Miller, you might be good enough to lead your own band, but I'll tell you that story next week when I'm talking about Glenn Miller. Well, actually, I'll tell it to you right now. In 1942, Ray was 10 minutes late for a Glenn Miller rehearsal. And Glenn Miller, you may not have known this about him, was an absolute taskmaster. Absolute taskmaster. When Ray Eberly was 10 minutes late, Glenn Miller fired him on the spot. Get out of here! Gone. Well, if you're good enough to sing for Glenn Miller and his orchestra, and famous for doing it, you're good enough to lead your own band. So Ray Eberly gets fired and forms his own group. Now, I'm being very polite, because it says the band had only moderate success. What that really means is not all band leaders who were band leaders did a great job of it. And Ray Eberly didn't. So only with his own band briefly, and then sadly, you know how the story unfolded. Glenn Miller missing in action over the English Channel during World War II. Tex Beneke, the new vocalist, takes over Glenn Miller's orchestra and rehires Ray Eberly to go back and join the band. It's an interesting little story of succession there. But in the time that he had his own band, Ray Eberly's theme song was Serenade in Blue, and he would be the one singing it.
When I hear that serenade in blue, I'm somewhere in another world alone with you, sharing all the joys we used to know. Once again your face comes back to me, just like the theme of some forgotten melody in the album of my memory, Serenade in Blue. It seems like only yesterday, a small cafe, a crowded floor, and as we danced the night away, I heard you say forevermore, and then the song became a sigh, forevermore became goodbye, and you remained in my heart. So tell me, darling, is there still a star, or only lonely ashes of the flame we blew? Should I go on whistling in the dark, serenade in blue?
So I have to give a little disclaimer before we sing Take the A Train. I mentioned Duke Ellington earlier. You can read about him coming to New York in the middle of the 1920s, the initial famous house band at the Cotton Club in Harlem, and then adding in Billy Strayhorn later in his story. I'll get back to that in a second. And then becoming world famous, actually, after World War II. So a marvelous span of a career. Look at the active years, 1914 to 1974. You're not going to find too many band leaders that could keep it going for 60 years, so to speak. Now, I will tell you, we're going to sing Take the A Train, even though singing doesn't do it any justice. Quite frankly, you remember it because of the band playing it, and the instrumental solos that the great musicians would take as a part of playing it. I felt we had to do it because of the connection to Billy Strayhorn, and when Ellington started his relationship with Billy Strayhorn as arranger for the band and writing some songs. Billy needed to meet with Duke at his house, and Billy lived uptown and across New York, and he needed directions to get to Duke Ellington's house. And Duke Ellington told him over the phone, well, start by getting on the A train. And then he gave him the rest of the changes so he could get over to Duke Ellington's home. And while he was on the train, a tune bubbled into Billy Strayhorn's head. He was a very gifted musician. And he actually ended up co-writing with the Rhythm Boys the song Take the A Train, which became a virtual anthem for Duke Ellington and his orchestra. So we'll sing it, but just kind of close your eyes and imagine the big dance band and the fancy solos, because my singing, I hate to tell you, even your singing, we're not going to do it justice. You must take the A train to Sugar Hill way up in Harlem. If you miss the A train, you'll find you missed the quickest way to Harlem. Hurry, get on now, it's coming. Listen to those rails a-thrumming. All home, get on the A train. Soon you'll be up between the Am I right? You need the big band. I proposed to Vicki that I'd spend $3,000 and get a dance band to come with me here today. She apologized and said she thought it wasn't accounted for in her budget. So we just had to do our best on that one. I'd like to explain Ziggy Elman's name because it's not his birth name. His birth name was Harry Aaron Finkelman. And the last part of his birth name, Finkelman, became the Elman part. And then he, as a young kid, was very, very fond of Florenz Ziegfeld and the Ziegfeld Follies. He greatly admired Ziegfeld and everything about him, and his friends called him Ziggy, because he was always talking about Florenz Ziegfeld. You can see about his start as a young musician. Look at what he plays first. Violin, then trombone, then trumpet, which he became best known for. And played trumpet for some pretty darn good folks, Benny Goodman, Tommy Dorsey. He then played in a service band during World War II, and if you're good enough to play for Benny Goodman and Tommy Dorsey, you're good enough to lead his own band, which he did in 1947, and this song was a big hit for Lilton Martha Tilton. Ziggy co-wrote it with his friend Johnny Mercer, and the angels sing. We meet, and the angels sing. The angels sing the sweetest song I ever heard. You speak, and the angels sing. Or am I breathing music into every word? Suddenly the setting is strange. I can see water and moonlight beaming, silver waves that break on some undiscovered shore. Then suddenly I see it all change. Now winter nights while the candles gleaming, through it all your face that I adore. You smile and the angels sing, and though it's just a gentle murmur at the start, we kiss and the angels sing, and leave their music ringing in my heart. Our next band leader, again, I could spend the whole program on. You can read about Benny Goodman's storied youth playing for Ben Pollock and other band leaders along the way, and then finally gaining his prominence in the late 20s, early 30s in a 3-hour, not a 1 hour, but a 3-hour radio program. Can you imagine? I mean, the title of the radio program was Let's Dance. If somebody's going to be on the radio for 3 hours, do you think they're the least little bit popular? I would say so. Now, the interesting thing is the theme song for the radio program and the popularity, which Benny considered very prominent, was Let's Dance. And once again, same thing, just put ditto marks under what I said before. You'll know the music, you won't know the words. So I'll just simplify it at that. The melody came from actually a classical piece of music, and Benny Goodman had classical talents on the playing of his clarinet. So that's why he chose this melody. And if I just play it, you're going to recognize it. You recognize it? Yeah. And hardly anybody's ever sung the words, so here we go with our lousy rendition of Let's Dance.
So let's dance, let's fly, once our love.
How I love to stay
by my side as we go with sweet music makes a spell over us. Oh, Jesus, my sweet, thrills me through the sweet melody, my melody, let's dance.
I'd rather just play it than dance. Our next band leader, Glenn Gray, became very prominent and eventually retired right over to Plymouth, Massachusetts. Just had to sneak that in because I live over that way. He had played for Gene Goldkette, and then when Gene Goldkette went bankrupt in 1929, Glenn Gray stepped in and took over the orchestra. He became known as the Glenn Gray and his Casa Loma Orchestra, and his theme song was written in 1933. It's the talk of the town, one of the classic little breakup songs ever.
I can't show my face, can't go any place. People stop and stay, it's so hard to make. Everybody knows you left me. It's the talk of the town. Every time we meet, my heart skips a beat. We don't stop to speak. Oh, it's just a beat. Everybody knows you left me. It's the talk of the town. We send out invitations to friends and relations, announcing our wedding day. Friends and relations, big congratulations. How can we face them? What can we say? Let's make up, sweetheart. We can't stay on. Don't let fools cry. Keep it from the side. I'll be up with ours being red. It's the talk of the town.
I do want to mention one more thing because it's so important about Glenn Gray. He was one of few band leaders that ran his band as a co-op band. And I want to explain that word to you. 98% of band leaders simply ran the band and paid the musicians whatever the heck they wanted. If you were a third chair sax player, you got maybe 25 bucks. First chair sax player might get 50 bucks. The band leader might get 300 bucks. So the cut came off the top, and then it was a descending pay scale based on the band leader's judgment of your ability. That's why musicians loved band leaders like Glenn Gray. In a co-op band, the band's paid $3 grand to play the dance for the night. It's divided by the number of people in the band, including the band leader, and everybody got the same cut. Talk about being fair. That's why musicians loved Glenn Gray and the few other band leaders that did it. Bobby Hackett, I must mention, born right down the road in Providence, Rhode Island, a pretty darn good trumpet player. But really it was when he reenacted a very famous Bix Beiderbecke trumpet solo in the Benny Goodman Carnegie Hall concert of 1938 that he really attracted attention. That one event, that one trumpet solo, that one reenactment allowed him to form his own band. And he did, and he chose as his theme song the Gershwin Brothers' Embraceable You. Embrace me, my sweet embraceable you. Embrace me, you irreplaceable you. Just one look at you, my heart grew tipsy in me. You and you alone bring out the gypsy in me. I love all the many charms about you. Above all, I want my arms about you. Don't be a naughty baby. Come to Papa blue. My sweet embraceable. Had to sneak a good little New England boy in the program somewhere. I'll try this. It almost always ends up with the same result. If I simply say the name Phil Harris, who are you thinking of?
Alice Faye.
It never fails. Somebody brave always says Alice Faye. And I'm going to be very blunt. Quite frankly, I think Phil Harris was better known for marrying Alice Faye and being on television with her than he was as a band leader. I'm just being honest. And you might say, well, then why the heck did you put him in? Well, he was significant. He was significant. And his band was prominent, and they were good. So he deserves to be here. Really, what put him on the map was when Phil Harris' band was the band for the Jack Benny radio program. So remember, I told you some bands played on the radio, and that's the significance of Phil Harris. And don't ask me why. There were songs that Harris was famous for. There was one I felt I should not do. It was titled, Smoke, Smoke, Smoke Your Cigarette. Don't know if you ever heard it, but I don't want to be promoting any habits that I should not be promoting. But actually, Phil Harris's personal choice of favorite song is one you might not know. That's what I like about the song. And I'm going to tell you, you can try to convince me to eat possum meat and some of the other things you're about to sing about. It ain't going to work for me. Why rave about the Carolines, about a cabin in the pines? Why moan about the Swanee shore? Why brag about the southern moon and how the slightly workers crew? Speak like this and you'll impress me more. Fried chicken, nice and sweet, corn bone and possum meat, mince pie can't be beat. That's what I like about the South. Pigtails and black-eyed peas, oblong and cottage cheese. You eat much as you please. That's what I like about the South. Biscuits, you ought to taste the ones Aunt Jenny makes. Flapjacks, don't stand the show with Jenny's good hoe cakes. Hot bread and turnip greens, fat black and lima beans. They know what living means. That's what I like about the South. That's my way of proving to you if you think you know every song that was ever written. Guess what? You don't.
I apologize, Ken.
Guess what? You don't. Have a nice time. I know there's a nearby town competing with a little cookout event today, so have a nice time and enjoy your hot dog. The next song I will stop on has nothing to do with the movie. It has everything to do with being Horace Height's personal favorite song. You can read about his radio programs, really famous on the radio. and in the 30s becoming known as Horace Heidt and his musical nights, giving a chance to a young singing comedian by the name of Art Carney, long before you would see him on the Jackie Gleason television show. Wonderful. He did something, I just want to point it out to you. I put it in the booklet because I found it so interesting that when Horace Heidt retired in 1953, he built one of the first retirement gated communities in the country. What a good idea he had. How many of those do we have now? Like thousands and thousands and thousands. His son, Horace Heidt Jr., still manages the Horace Heidt Estates, a gated retirement community in California. But his theme song is a band leader, Gone with the Wind. Gone with the wind, just like a leaf that is blown away. Gone with the wind, my romance is thrown away. Yesterday's kisses are still on my lips. I had a lifetime of heaven at my fingertips, but now all is gone. Gone is the rapture that filled my heart. Gone with the wind, the gladness that filled my heart. Just like a flame, love burned brightly, then became an empty smoke dream that is gone. Gone with the wind. Number 21 is Woody Herman's specialty, the blues. Woody Herman would be the exact opposite of Harry James. Harry James would get the label sweet band because of violins and the beautiful sound. Woody Herman had a beautiful sound, but it was a hard driving sound. That's what he wanted from his musicians. So in 1936, he took over the Isham Jones Orchestra. We'll get to Isham Jones in a bit. And then became known as the band that played the blues. And he would play this kind of song and love it with his band. Your buddy Louis Armstrong had a recording of this song in the late 40s. Do you remember something like, my mama done told me when I was in need pants, my mama done told me, son, something like that anyway. By the way, I had nothing to do with the writing of these lyrics. My mother never told me any such thing. My mama done told me when I was in need pants, my mama done told me, son, a woman will sweet talk and give you a big heart, but when the sweet talk is done, a woman is two-faced, a worrisome thing to leave you to sing the blues in the night. While the rains are falling, hear the train a calling, ooh-wee. My mother done told me, hear the lonesome whistle, blow across the trestle, ooh-wee. My mother done told me, ooh-wee, a clickety-clack, a echoing back, the blues in the night. Now, Ina Ray Hutton certainly is at or near the top of the list of women band leaders. I think I wouldn't be telling you any secret to tell you that 98% of band leaders were male, but there were women band leaders scattered around the country, but very few would rise to the level of the big name band leaders that I've been sharing with you so far. But Ina Ray Hutton, certainly deserving of that honor. You can read about her childhood and singing in reviews and the like, and she was the older sister of June Hutton. I don't know if you remember her as an actress in movies. And then in 1934, she formed and led an all-girls orchestra. She's leading it, all girls playing in it. And she wanted to make 2 points. Number one, a woman could be a dance band leader, and a good one. And number two, women could be the musicians in a good dance band. And they were. She did that for essentially 5 years, and then in 1939 she went one step further. She fired all the girls, dyed her hair from blonde. She was known when leading the girls' band as the blonde bombshell of rhythm. She dyed her hair brunette and hired all guys, and she was still the band leader. She wanted to make further emphasis that a woman could be in charge of great guy musicians, and she was good. She'd wear beautiful gowns with a corsage, the flower, the bird of paradise, pinned on her gown when she'd come out. Boy, could she sing. You're nobody's sweetheart now. They know, baby, you somehow. Fancy walls, silken gown, you'll be out of place in your own hometown. When you walk down the avenue, I just can't believe that it's you. Painted lips, painted eyes, wearing a bird of paradise. It all seems wrong somehow, that you're nobody's sweetheart now. So see, at the risk of running over a bit, I'll tell you just one more thing. She was singing about herself. She's singing about herself. So you see in the lyrics, you see fancy hose, silken gown, that's what she's wearing, right? You'd be out of place in your own hometown. She was born in a small little area on the south side of Chicago. She would be out of place there. And then she's painted lips, beautiful makeup, painted eyes, wearing the bird of paradise. It all seems wrong somehow that as a band leader you don't have time for a boyfriend. Get it? You're nobody's sweetheart. Now, she's too busy running the band and planning the arrangements and all of that. Harry James, I mentioned a few moments ago, that prototypical example of the sweet band. It was really, he debuted his own band in 39, but then in 41 he added strings and violins, and that really reinforced the sweet band label that was given to Harry James. Marvelous names, the first one to employ Frankie Sinatra. Although Frankie promptly got swiped from Harry James by Tommy Dorsey when Tommy needed a good vocalist in the early 1940s. So appearing in movies just as Glenn Miller and his orchestra did, just an amazing life story for Harry James. And notice I've been very selective about not talking about wives today. One of Harry James' wives was Betty Grable. You may have remembered that, but I'm not here to talk about their social lives. I'm concentrating on musicianship. Otherwise, I'd need to do a whole other program just on Artie Shaw and his 8 wives. I don't know why, but Harry James loved Chitty Bitty Bit. He made it kind of a signature song for his band. Chitty Bitty Bit, a melody your heart can toss up to the sky. Chitty Bitty Bit, a song to sing whenever things have gone awry. Chitty Bitty Bit, when you feel sad, just come in for a little while. Chitty Bitty Bit, so as you begin, Chitty Bitty Bit, the world will start. Our next band leader, again, so significant, but so interesting in his story. Isham Jones was the son of a very poor family in Colton, Ohio, and yes, his father was a coal miner. And the family had no money for a piano, but he could play the piano by ear and write songs the same way Irving Berlin could. So Irving Berlin would make up songs in his head and play the piano by ear, and Isham Jones every bit as talented. Finally, the family scrimped and saved, and they got enough money to buy an old, beautiful, big old, upright, beat-up piano, a second-hand piano. And he could already play, because Isham would play the piano at the town hall or the piano at your house if you were a neighbor and you had a piano. But the day the piano got delivered to the house, Isham Jones stayed up all night and made the music for It Had to Be You. It gained its lyrics from Gus Kahn. He moved to New York City, and Isham Jones became a big name band leader in the heart of the 1930s with the story of swing. I have a way of proving that to you. I just told you that a small town kid, son of a poor family, made it big. And I can prove it to you. You'll see how. Here we go. It had to be you. It had to be you. I wandered around and finally found somebody who could make me be true, could make me be blue, and me to be right, just to be sad, thinking of you. Some others I've seen might never be me, might never be cross, or try to be boss, but they wouldn't do. For nobody else gave me a thrill. With all your faults, I love you still. It had to be you, wonderful you. It had to be you. You're making my point. Small town America kid made it big, I think. Spike Jones got his nickname. You don't mind if I give you like almost 5 minutes on Spike Jones? Okay. Because I know I'm running over a little bit. But Spike Jones got his nickname because his father was an early railroad company man. Back in the days when they were laying down the railroads out west, and they had to drive the spikes in, and his dad would take his kid along with him out where they were working on a railroad, and he'd grab the sledgehammer and drive that spike down in, and the railroad workers gave him the nickname Spike. So that explains the nickname. The next thing that you'll see in the booklet there was drums at age 11, and a very good drummer, and joining Victor Young's orchestra. Victor Young, very prominent in the late 20s, 30s as a arranger for dance bands and a songwriter. He joined the John Scott Trotter Orchestra. You'll hear that name again next week. He played on Bing Crosby's first recording of White Christmas. I mean, this is a great musician we're talking about as a drummer. In 1943, he formed his own band called City Slickers, and the rest of the career was fun with a capital F. And fun, F-U-N. I wanted to give you some examples, but first I thought I'd ask you. Anybody remember anything Spike Jones would do just for the fun of it? Pardon me?
He just did little horns and made funny.
He would have funny little, like, kazoos and stuff to make noises on. And he would do that in the middle of a song. He would reach into his pocket and take out a starter's pistol from a track and field event, a little gun that shoots off blanks, and he'd go, bang! And then he'd put it back in his pocket and continue drumming. And when somebody would say, why in the world did you do that? He'd say, well, it's a dance. I had to keep them on their toes. I think if he did it today, he'd get arrested, right? I mean, he probably couldn't even do that today. I thought I'd give you a couple of more. My personal, he'd use a washboard, the old washboard. He'd just stop drumming, pick up a washboard, and be going like this to keep the rhythm going for the band. And then I thought I'd give you two other examples. One that's not all that polite, but it shows you the whimsical nature of Spike Jones. He took a toilet seat, the actual, how do I be polite, the actual part you're in repose on, and he would put strings across it, attach them with screws, and he would pick it up and he would strum it. And he gave it a name, he called it a latrina. I mean, was this guy funny? And you might say, why the heck is he sitting in that chair over there? Well, I'm about to tell you my personal favorite story. My personal favorite was one night when the people arrived for the dance. There's a chair on the stage, and beside it is a full-sized harp. Now, when earning my music degree, I had to help the harpist on occasion move her harp. Those suckers are heavy. They're big harps and a chair. So the band, Spike Jones and his City Sicklers, come out to play. And Spike gets on the drummer's stool, and he's about ready to cue up the first song for the band. And the young woman comes out and she sits in her chair next to her harp and has this big little carrying bag right. That was a good oxymoron, a big little carrying bag. But she has a little carrying bag next to her and she is sitting there, and when he cues up the first song, she reaches into the carrying bag and takes out her knitting. She proceeds to knit for the whole dance. She never touched the harp once. He rented the harp just as the gag for the night. So he pays the money to have somebody move in a harp and has the girl, one of his buddies, sitting there knitting. And that was the joke for that night.
Jack, he was the band leader at my junior prom.
Oh my God!
Back in 1947.
Did he play as Latrina? What did he do? Do you remember?
No.
He must have done something funny.
Oh, the stuff he used on his records.
Okay. The other thing he would do is he would sing. And he was not a singer. And he would butcher a song. I'll just start this one. He would go something like this. It's a concluded rendezvous that overlooks the avenue. With someone sharing a delightful chat of this and that with cocktails for two. I mean, did that guy like to have fun? I'm sorry, we're going to do it normal. In some secluded rendezvous that overlooks the avenue, with someone sharing a delightful chat of this and that and cocktails for two, as we enjoy a cigarette to some exquisite chansonette. On your calendar when next Wednesday it says Jack Craig at 11, and the second half of the alphabet will be celebrated at that time. And then I'll just tell you ahead of time that at the end of August I'll be back for another 2 weeks, and we're going to concentrate our singing from that era right before rock and roll. A very interesting 2 weeks worth of songs from 1950 until about 1954 or so. I just wanted to tell you so you can get your t-shirts and your cigarettes rolled up in your sleeves, and you can get your poodle skirts out and anything else you might want. I mean, they may be up in the attic in storage still. Thank you. By all means, take your booklet if you'd like to have it. There's some good information in there about these band leaders.
Thank you.
You're most welcome.
I had a Manchester.
There you go.
Back in 1947.
Did you know how lucky you were? How big a name band leader you was?
We had a
You were very quiet.